The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 5th chapter. Now when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, a man named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged at him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hand on her so that she may be made well and live." So Jesus went with him. Now a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. And there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware of the power that had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, and be healed of your disease." Now while he was speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make such a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, it's sleeping." And they laughed at him. He put them all outside. He took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in to where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was about 12 years of age. At this they were overcome with amazement, and he strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and he told them to give her something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm sure that some of you have heard that the vicar and I, along with Lutheran and the rest of our youth, were in New York City this past week, and we spent the previous 19 hours getting from New York to here on a very tedious bus ride. So both the vicar and I missed the 8:15 and 9:25 liturgy, but we're glad to be here with you this morning. And I'm glad to be here because, not only because I have a compliment. I want to say you write these things, and they're not good for 3 more years. At least you change your mind that much time. But also, I think there's something very deep going on here that sometimes we kind of gloss over, and we're all given to missing. And I'd like to offer up to you that we all know the saying, "There are no atheists in a foxhole." Right? We've heard that. There are no atheists in a foxhole. And wound up in that is a sense that somehow we come looking for Jesus, we come looking for God when we need something. That's implied in that statement. And those of us who come to church frequently might scoff at that. And we've sometimes been taught to think that that's a bad thing, to simply come to God, to ask God for something, to simply pray to Jesus or pray in Jesus' name simply to get something. And we're supposed to have a deeper relationship with God than simply wanting things from God. But not with you. Then you read through the Gospels. Nearly everybody who comes to Jesus initially because they have a problem. Almost everybody. There is that Nicodemus story. I know, I read that one. There is that story. But almost all the others, somebody has something wrong. They're hungry. They're sick. They're dying. And they come to Jesus. And he fixes their problem. All of them. And the only ones who don't come, apart from perhaps Nicodemus, the only other ones who come to debate the meaning of life or debate what it means to go to heaven or what it means to be God's people, and all of those people go away disappointed. The ones who come looking for something, get it. Don't they? Almost all the time, they get it. That's the story today. Right? We're met by a man, Jairus, leader of the synagogue, faithful man, goes to church a lot, or at least to synagogue a lot, prays a lot. And he comes to this itinerant preacher to say, my 12-year-old daughter is dying. God's name, can't you come and help her? And Jesus' response is as it always is. Off they go. And on the way, he runs into this very famous story of this woman with hemorrhages for 12 years. And he was afraid to even come close to her. And that's interesting because she understands for 12 years her hemorrhages have made her unclean. She can't go to the synagogue. She can't be in polite company. She can't associate with other people. She is ritually unclean. And her uncleanliness is such that her contact with other people will make them unclean as well. You begin to understand her reticence to come to Jesus. Would he even touch her? Under normal circumstances, he shouldn't even touch her. She doesn't even want to be close. She doesn't want to see him. She doesn't want him to know. If I just touch his clothes, she comes with this desperate need to be back, healed. But not only, I could imagine, just healed, but to be in the community, to be with her family, to be with her friends. And so she comes to him secretly to touch him and to just touch his clothes, which by itself would defile him. Again, she takes the risk. See, these people come to Jesus because they need something. It's as plain as the nose on your hands. We come to Jesus because we need something. And that is an appropriate place to find yourself. Because when we look at our lives, we all know that all of us need something, don't we? The problem for us frequently, and not infrequently for those people in the gospel stories, we always don't know what it is that we need. What we see happening in this story, the gospel stories, is not only do they get health, do they get restored to their community, they get a new vision of the world, they get a new life, if you may. They're put back into the community in a new way. It's hard to imagine that this woman who's been bleeding for 12 years doesn't see the world in the way that it's hard to imagine that when you hear that story, if you were that girl and you hear this story about your life and your parents tell it to you, is it not impossible to not imagine that you see your life in a new way? That your life has some sort of new meaning and understanding of what it means to be alive, and to be in this world, and to be present, and what on earth would your life mean? What could it mean? And yet for us, it's not so much that we come to ask for things. It's not that we come and want God to do something for us.
perhaps the deeper question is, do we see that when something happens to us, that more than just our health has been transformed? Do we see that if our relationships are healed with one another, that more than just our relationship with that person is there? Do we see that if our relationships with our neighbors are healed, that it's more than just, I can get along with this person, they don't love me anymore? Something different is happening. When Jesus does these things, he doesn't do it just because he's a swell guy, just because he feels bad for those people, and just because this woman spent all of her money on doctors who have been quacks or didn't know what they were doing, or anything like that. But that this is a sign of everything he's talking about, that their lives are a sign of the wholeness he says God is bringing to the whole world. In other places he said, what do you see happening? The lame walk, the deaf hear, the mute speak. God's world is coming, and it implies different things. God's world is coming, and so those with broken health find help. Those with broken relationships find community. Our healing and our self is not just about us. If we fail at anything, it is that we walk away from asking God for things, and we walk away content that we got it. Instead of seeing that getting what it is that we're asking for turns us into a living sign of God's presence in the world. A living sign of the very things that God is trying to do in the world. If God blesses us with riches, do you think that that is just for our own personal use? Or is it for the benefit of his world? As you read the stories, I'm convinced more and more it's not wrong to say, God, help me. God, I need. God, I am desperate. God, I know not where to turn. And if we believe that God hears us, I also believe it is not just for us alone that these things happen. It is for the purposes of showing the world what God's world looks like. That God's world is full of people who are fed, people who have health, people who have whole relationships, people who somehow figure out that the world is about something that is bigger than they themselves. To pray, to receive, to live, is to become a living understanding the presence of God in this place, in this time, that this world is changing around us, and God is changing it through our lives. We experience that in this place, and in the places we go this week. My hope for you would be as you leave this week, as you go on your way, as you celebrate the holiday, as we remember our nation's birthday, as we remember those things that we are about, both as a nation and as individuals, that it is that we would become a sign of all of the things that God has promised the world could be. May God bless us